and teacher helping people to learn to live more fun and fulfilling lives and create a fun and fulfilling future. So none of us have anything to do with physical health and well-being and everything to do with physical health and well-being. We were actually, before we went live, having a little chat with each other about how we're doing. And it's funny how sometimes when people hear that I've been practicing presence for a long time, they have expectations to how I am. Like I don't feel pain, or I just sit and I just meditate all the time, or I'm always satisfied with my life and never dissatisfied, never sad, never angry. There are all of these expectations to being a person living in presence or practicing presence. So I hate to disappoint you, but I do experience physical pain. I do experience emotional pain. I also experience emotional joy. And I suspect those of you who are here as well do that, because no matter what, we're all human. And Bobby, you've talked about your cancer diagnosis that you've been sort of having treated and living with for the past while. And Jan, who just got a text message or something, you
Not at
have
all.
also spoken about some things in your life. So we all have something. Does any of you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, I'll say a little bit about that. I got my diagnosis in early to mid November. I don't remember exactly the date. And for about the next 5 or 6 weeks, uh, I, I also, I've been practicing presence for a long time, and I've had about a 5 year period of a pretty quiet mind. And like you, I still emotions arise, pain arises, things happen. But I've been able to, for the most part, to stay very present through all of that and recognize that the emotions that may be arising in me are not telling me about my circumstances, but rather they're inner guidance telling me how I'm doing on the inside. And when I got the diagnosis, I had about 5 or 6 weeks of just the debilitating mental chatter. I mean, to the point where it was very difficult for me to concentrate on anything. I pulled back from coaching newer clients just because I wasn't in the headspace to really be able to do that. And after the first of the year, my surgery was originally scheduled for January the 7th, and I tested positive for COVID on January the 5th. So they had to postpone me for 30 days. My partner, who lives with me part of the time, she works in a remote village here in Alaska part of the time as well, had taken time off. And, once the surgery was canceled, she had to leave. And she said, "Are you going to be okay?" And when she asked, I honestly didn't know. And I said, "Yeah, on one level, I know I'm going to be fine, but how I'm going to get back there, I actually have no idea." And for me, the key was bringing more and more mindfulness activities into my daily life. I've been a meditator for a long time, and I amped that up a little bit. I'm a Reiki practitioner. I was giving myself Reiki treatments. I started doing yoga a lot more actively, and I even experimented with Tai Chi. And I was just finding doing all of these exercises, both calming, brought me back more into the moment and away from all of the chronic mental stress that had really been knocking me out there for a while. And I got back to the point where the silence was there again, even more profoundly than it was. And I really feel like that gave me the opportunity to have my body in an optimal healing state. I was doing a lot of stuff to help accelerate that, and I had a lot of other people that were doing energy work, and I was, of course, working with Western medicine as well, and a lot of people were giving me advice on supplements, and I was just able to do that very, very mindfully. And I think that in terms of unleashing our innate well-being that is inside of all of us, being able to get into the moment and get out of the imagination. We're very good at creating worst case scenarios and kind of presenting them out into the future, coming back present again and being in the moment is very helpful. And Jan, if I could kind of cue you up, because on part of that conversation that we were having before we went live, you were talking about a misdiagnosis that listening to your body was able to say that I don't think
Yeah.
this original diagnosis was correct. So I'd love to share for you to share that again with the audience.
Yeah, sure. I had a fall here at home just before Christmas last year, so third week in December, and I went and had it looked at, and the diagnosis was torn tendons in the rotary cuff in my shoulder. So I let it rest over the holidays and then started doing physiotherapy. But after several weeks, couple of months really of physio, it wasn't improving, and to me, it seemed to be disimproving. I seemed to be in more pain rather than less pain, or discomfort more than pain. So I went back to the doc and I went for an MRI, and it showed that there was a fracture in the inside of the socket of the shoulder joint itself that wouldn't have showed up originally because of where it was. And because I was using bands, resistance bands in physio for the rotary cuff injury to build up the muscles, it was still fractured almost 3 months later. So, but yeah, that was the power of just tuning into what was going on in my own body. And I knew it was going in the wrong direction. And just to have, wisdom showed up and said, you better go check that out, Jenny. Not so sure. Yeah. But, listening to you speaking as well, Bobby, on the whole chronic mental stress, I've spoken before about my own chronic mental stress, and I ended up with a handful of chronic autoimmune disorders, and all the symptoms that go with them. And, and it was only when I practiced presence and learned to journey inward, and listen to the messages, and even learn how to read the messages and the guidance and understand it and follow it, that all my symptoms over time dissolved, dissipated, disappeared. And I still have the labels, but I don't take the meds anymore, and apart from one. And I don't have the pain anymore because I don't have the chronic mental stress anymore.
Yeah.
And that's the real power of presence to me when it comes to physical health. You can have pain. The body can get broken and the physical body can get hurt and be at dis-ease and need to sort itself out. It's a system. It's always in movement. But it's the power of being present to what's going on that helps us navigate our way through it with less suffering. Now, I'm not saying that, if I had your diagnosis that I'd have been, umming my way through it. I absolutely wouldn't have. I'd have had a busy mind too. And I know that for sure, because when I got the diagnosis of the fracture in the shoulder, I said to Christy, my husband, that night, I said, if somebody had told me before I fell that I was going to fall and fracture my shoulder, I would have thought that I would have been in debilitating pain. That just sounds so horrendous.
Yeah.
The reality is, I'm not. But in the days that followed finding out about the fracture, my pain started getting worse. And
Ah,
it was only, again, through the power of presence that I realized I had started running a story
Hmm.
and having a little pity party. Oh my God, it's actually fractured. I've been walking around with a fracture. Poor me, and listening to the pain and focusing in on the pain, and it started amplifying. And again, just by noticing that and, having a little laugh at myself and seeing the funny side of it, it settled down again. And yeah, there's some discomfort, but nothing like I would have expected a fracture to be like.
Yeah.
And I find that fascinating.
mhm, mhm.
Yeah.
I
That.
think you bring up a really important point, Jan, and that is actually you both do. I'm noticing it's not that we don't ever go into story. That's not what it's about. It's not that we don't ever get scared or ever time travel or anything like that. It's that when we do, and we notice that we do, we can bring ourselves out of it and come back into presence and return to calm and peace
Right.
Yeah.
and stay there for great lengths of time often. Sometimes it's a roller coaster. I remember Christopher Reeve. He played the actor who played Superman.
Hmm.
Yes,
He was thrown from a horse and broke his neck, and he ended up paralyzed. Yeah.
that's right. Yeah.
And I remember him talking about when he was interviewed once how he was so grateful to be over the roller coaster. Oh no, we've lost
Oh, we've
Bobby.
lost Bobby. He'll
Well,
come
I'll keep
back.
an eye on him and bring him back in. He flew away like Superman.
He did.
Um,
His superpowers.
yeah. He said that he was so grateful to have finally gotten off the roller coaster because it was hard to be on. And it's that sort of terror and calm and terror and calm and terror and calm. And sometimes there is that phase of making that adjustment from getting shocking news or having some shocking or debilitating life change where it takes a while for our whole system to recalibrate and find its way and find its back to itself. And the self is, the free flow of energy and the peace and the calm and the joy that just is not, and love, of course, that is naturally there and being in the world. And sometimes it can take a while to be in the world as the new me, if I've gotten some sort of diagnosis, for example.
Yeah.
And okay, I'm still me under all of that, still me. And then there's something about being in the world that I may need to learn. So it can be a bit of a roller coaster, but we come back to presence. So for anybody out there wondering and thinking, I can't do it. And those of you who are watching, please feel free to comment questions if you want to say anything about this or anything else we have said or say. If there's any expectation of having to be perfect, presence,
Excuse me.
that's not presence.
Mm-mm.
Presence is being with what is and noticing when you're not, and then coming back.
Yeah.
Because we're human and
Yeah.
life does throw baseballs at us and curveballs at us and things we may not feel prepared to handle. And we don't always know how to handle them. And it's easy to get knocked a bit off kilter or very off kilter. And just to know that that's part of the whole process. And we know where we started and we can come back there. And sometimes we need help. Bobby, you've also told stories about needing help to somebody calling you, for example, and helping you to get back on track. I think many of us, and many of us have experienced that, where someone lended a hand somehow, or we went to talk to someone because
Yeah.
we were out of kilter. We called up a friend or went to visit somebody or cried on someone's shoulder and then got back into presence and center. So just to let you know, if you're not there, it might be because you're human. And it's always a practice. We call it a practice because we train.
Yeah.
We train and we'll train till we die.
Yeah. There's a term that I hear a lot of the principals teachers using, and they talk about rumble strips. And I really like that term because, they
Did you
talk
say
about
rumble strips?
rumble strips, like when we're going
Okay.
off the road and you hit a rumble strip.
Oh, is that what they are? Okay, thank
And it
you.
reminds you to get back on into your lane. Yeah, they're called rumble strips, apparently. And they talk about how when we get off into story, and we're off kilter and we're feeling off balance and we're real busy or whatever, that's a rumble strip. And if we, when we remember to view those things as rumble strips, it throws us back into presence. And then we know what to do, to call a friend or
Yeah.
whatever. And I just love the whole idea of rumble strips. I heard Dr. Keith Blevins talking about it one time. And he was asking somebody, would it be more useful if you were driving on the highway to be able to stay in the same lane all the time, or to be able to navigate your way and know how to be in which lane at different times? And the answer becomes obvious. But we tend to want one feeling. We want to feel good all the time. And when we don't like it. But if we can just remember that they're rumble strips, they throw us back.
Yeah.
Into
And
the moment.
one thing that I've noticed, sorry to interrupt, but I just have this like really powerful thought, is there does, once you have practiced presence enough, and particularly one of the ways that I use rumble strips in my own practice, the terminology, is getting to recognize and making the shift, because we're conditioned to believe that our feelings are telling us about our circumstances. And you can see this with a friend who's up or down. If they're particularly up, ask them why, and they're going to point to something outside themselves almost 100% of the time. And same if they're feeling down. It may be, if they're up, I got a windfall, I've met the one, my old boss that was a jerk got fired, and now the new person seems pretty good. If they're down, it's, I got a revenue letter from the revenue service, or going through a nasty breakup, or, I've had a financial setback or whatever. And you get to the point in practicing it enough that feelings like frustration and anger and anxiety can become those rumble strips, where sometimes the answer may be to sit with that. Sometimes the answer may be the anger is very appropriate. Sometimes the answer is, I've gotten lost in a story again, and this has nothing to do with what's going on right now. This has me projecting myself out into the future and imagining a worst case scenario that's not happening right now. And when we begin to view those, those feelings as signals, inner guidance to how we're doing right now, they become, they start to serve that role as a rumble strip pretty quickly, and it can just be another source for inquiry to say, okay, what's really going on here?
Yeah. An opportunity to check in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which we don't do often enough. I mean, we're all the time, all day, every day, we're asking other people, how are you doing? That's how we all started the call. Hey, I haven't seen you in a while. How are you doing? What's going on? But we rarely give that gift to ourselves. And one of the things that I've noticed working with people who are experiencing chronic pain that may not necessarily have a medical reason for it, it's not a fracture in the shoulder or any other issue. When I sit and talk with them and say, how are you doing right now? Scale of 1 to 10, where's the pain? The common answer is it's an 11, or it's a 12, or it's a 13. To which my response is, okay, that was a reflective response, but do me a favor, just check in with yourself, scan, how are you actually doing right now? And the normal response from that is that the 11 or 12 goes down to a 5 or a 6. And then that becomes, okay, well, so why did you give me the 11 or 12? And it'll either be, well, I've got physical therapy later today, and I know I'm going to be in a lot of pain because I always am. Or I woke up this morning and I slept kind of funny and my back was just killing me, and it's actually has dissipated a little bit. But just getting to the point where you can say, how are you doing right now? That's a small hinge that swings really, really big doors.
It's very interesting, Bobby. I was with a group of people earlier this week. No, last week. It's only Monday. Late last week. And I was doing exactly that, checking in with them and, oh yeah, we're grand, we're fine,
Yeah.
whatever. And I stopped them and I asked them, I said, no, I said, I just want you to really check in
Yeah.
and see how are you doing. One person broke down and had to leave the room. Several others got really, really quiet. One started giggling and, there was a mix of reactions, but when people actually stop
Yeah.
and check in, it is a door opener, to what's authentically here in this moment, whatever that
Yeah.
is.
Yeah. And just getting into that habit of
Yeah.
checking in that way, there's lots of physical techniques that you can do to reduce pain or to reduce mental static or, to reduce uncomfortable emotions that you are
Mhm.
experiencing. There's wonderful things that you can do with your breath. But the first key that you've got to get to, going back to that chronic pain example, so just getting them to check in thoroughly often cuts the pain level in half. A few simple breathing techniques and just helping the body relax, because we're in this tightness all the time, can have it go down easier. And then the trick becomes getting that check-in habit and interrupting the patterns that we're unconsciously unfolding all the time, and just checking in and see how you're doing and not letting the pain get up to a 9 or a 10 or an 11 or a 12 or whatever. But, slay your dragons while they're small. So if you woke up and your pain was at 0 or 1, and then you're checking in half an hour later or whenever, and it's like up to a 4. Okay, well, let's not let it get to 7 or 8 or 10. Let's do a little something to bring yourself back to this moment, and it can be as simple as an easy breathing technique, or spending even just a couple of minutes in quiet meditation can have a big reset effect for you.
Is there something you could share, Bobby, with people in a breathing technique for pain?
Uh, yes.
I don't mean to put you on the spot.
That's okay. And at the end, I'll give a link to my online group where I've got like 21 days of different techniques for different things that you can use. One simple one, and this is good for really anything because it just brings back balance, which is called alternative nostril breathing. And what you do with this is close off one nostril. So you could start by closing off in this case, it's my right, breathing in through my left, and then switching out through my right, and then back in through my right. And just so you're just going out, in, out, in, out, in, and closing off one nostril at a time. And what that supposedly does, at least the science as I understand it, is we naturally do that anyway. We're breathing dominantly through one nostril or another, pretty much depending on what we're doing and what emotional state we're experiencing. And that shifts normally, and it's about every 30 or 45 minutes it kind of tends to shift. So what we're doing is like a body hack to just say, I'm going to bring back the balance and do it a little bit more quickly. And in fact, I teach meditation as well. And the very first few days, this is all I get them to do is that alternative nostril breathing, and do it for 8 or 10 minutes. And that's kind of like the meditator's hack is what they call that in the TM world. So that's a good technique. There's another one called infinity breath, and that's very good for chronic pain. And the way that works is you're seeing where the pain is located. So I'm just going to borrow you, Jan, if I could. Which shoulder is it that you're
My left
having?
one.
Okay, so what you can do is, you don't need to close your eyes because you can watch and just kind of see this, but it's helpful to close your eyes. Just imagine that you're breathing through that pain. So just in the theater of your mind, just imagine that you're breathing from behind that pain into it and then back out again. And you're just imagining an infinity symbol as that shows up for you. So if we were actually doing this, I would get you, down into a nice and quiet space, and I would want you to envision your pain and however that shows up for you. So it may be a ball of energy, it may be a crack, it may be just a throbbing sort of pain. However that shows up for you, that's fine. And just envision that you're breathing into and out of that pain, and then switch. So breathe from the back to the front, and then from the left to the right, and then from the top to the bottom. And just repeat those cycles and follow your breath. And a normal natural occurrence as you're doing that is your breath will become deeper and longer. And it's not unusual that people will start pausing. They'll breathe in to the pain and then out of the pain and then back in again and back out again. I don't know if all of my hand manipulations and everything is easier or more difficult. They were there either way. So
I
does
have
that
to
make sense?
practice. Yes, it does. But the mind doesn't want to go from side to side when it's breathing. I have to practice.
Well, with a little bit of practice, you'll find it gets easier.
Yeah.
It's anything's difficult the first time
I'll give it a go.
that you try it. Yeah, and be open to the idea that both, however you happen to be symbolizing that pain, can change, as well as whatever visualizations that you may have showing up for you as you're doing the infinity breath. And often people tell me, it starts off with a yellow light or a white light. That's something that people get a lot. Sometimes it's purple, other times it's other colors, but those are pretty common. And it's not unusual for the light to get brighter from the infinity breath as it's kind of almost like poking holes in the pain and just turning
Yeah.
the pain into Swiss cheese and just keep going after it
Cool.
again and again and again. And it's a
Excellent.
powerful tool. And I do have in the Our Mindful Life group, I've got a more detailed, probably an 8 or 10 minute explanation of how to do that particular breath.
I'll check it out. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. And for those of you who are watching and have tried the breathing or followed along while Bobby was giving instructions, let us know how it worked out for you. We would love to hear if you thought it was difficult or easy and what you noticed in your body at the time. Those of you trying at a later date, if you're watching the replay, also please write in the comments and let us know, and we can get back to you. If you have any questions, of course, you're more than welcome to ask us.
Mhm.
I'm going to chime in with something else.
Please do.
I sometimes run into people, put it that way, who I will ask, if you could get rid of your pain, would you? Or if you could reduce your pain, would you? And they realize when they're very present and honest with themselves that the answer is no. Now I'm talking physical pain.
Mhm.
It can also be emotional pain, but we're on today's topic is physical health. Of course, it's also well-being, which also involves the mental health. And I remember the first time someone said that very clearly, no, realized that the answer was no. And then it became an exploration into, what do you think you will lose if you don't have your pain anymore?
Yeah.
And that's a very important exploration. And it can be very difficult to be completely honest with oneself, because sometimes we discover things about ourselves we don't really want to know, we don't want to admit. But sometimes just if we feel neglected or want attention, even. Some people learn from a very young age that they get more attention from their parents or their teachers or the minister at church or whoever. They get more attention when they're being naughty or when they're being noisy or when they're sick than if they're being well behaved or they're healthy or whatever. Sometimes that can happen when one sibling is physically ill, has some sort of problem, and the other one feels unseen and ends up perhaps actually being neglected because the one who is sick needs so much attention. And then it becomes a habit to be sick in order to be loved, to be in pain in order to feel loved. So it's absolutely worthwhile to do that self-inquiry and ask the question, if I could reduce my pain or remove my pain, would I? And if the answer is honestly no, at some level no, to meet that no with curiosity and just allow it to be there without judging it. We talk about being present to things. We don't always explain what we mean by that, but just allowing it to be there. It is there. So it's there, and what's it trying to tell you? What's it trying to tell you about yourself and what you need, what you feel you're lacking, perhaps? And then finding a healthier way, a more positive way to meet that need rather than causing yourself pain, injuring yourself even. Some people engage in self-harming behaviors to meet a psychological need. So they cut themselves, for example. So, or develop addictions, for example. These are very often ways to try and feel good, loved, noticed, whatever. But they're not constructive ways. They're not healthy ways. As we think of the idea of health as something that's good for us, without being at the same time harmful. So anyone who is in pain, I invite you to meet yourself in that kind of inquiry and notice if something comes up that surprises you so that you can address it and replace a not constructive habit with a constructive habit.
Yeah.
So I just thought I'd bring that. Bobby,
yeah, I've got a question for you. When you ask that question of people, I mean, when you ask that to us and just in general, my initial response was, well, of course, everybody wants the pain to go down. And I can hear people saying, well, yeah. And if they're not saying that, so I'm wondering, is this a realization that they're coming to in the moment for the first time with you? Or is it more often something that on some level they've been kind of aware of and you're just sort of pointing it out to them?
It can be at very different levels. It can be the first time. It can be something that they've sort of thought something is not quite the way it should be. And it's really interesting because I hear you say when you talk to people and ask them if they want their pain to go down, or I can't remember how you phrased the question, and they say, well, yeah, of course. When I hear that, sometimes I'll follow it up with a question, are you sure? Or notice less than constructive behavior, and they're saying yes, then why are you not doing what you need to do in order to reduce your pain? Because if they're continuing with some sort of not constructive behavior, there's something in them that does not want to change their situation, and it's probably unconscious. Because if they really do want less pain and could do something about it, why wouldn't they?
Right.
If they really want it.
Right.
So then there's something in there, consciously or unconsciously, they're doing something to keep the status quo. And it could be safety needs, it could be all kinds of things. But they don't do what's best for them, put it that way, to ameliorate the situation. And so there's some need being fed by keeping keeping things the way they are. And so that needs to be addressed. So I will sometimes really pry, like really, and not back off. Are you sure? Yeah, of course I'm sure. And that's the kind of reaction. If I just, of course, obvious.
Yeah.
I'm like, that came a bit too quick. There's no, is there up there? That's a head response for me. It's like, okay, did you actually check?
Can I throw a different perspective on that?
Yes.
And I don't necessarily disagree with anything that you're saying, but when I see people in physical pain that don't want to change, sometimes that can be wisdom in action. If creating physical pain and keeping physical pain in your body is a solution to a mental problem or the chronic mental stress you're under, because everybody's doing the best they can given their understanding of how life works. And if your understanding and belief and knowledge of how life works is that you can be a victim of circumstance, and that it's outside in, and that other people put feelings in you and all this kind of stuff, then that's the best somebody can do if that's their paradigm. And they're relieving mental pain by creating physical pain in the body. And on one level, I think compassion can be called for. Because the only way that will change is if somebody has a realization or an insight that comes from deep within them someplace.
Right.
And, the best we can do is hold space and try and create an environment for that to happen for them. But it depends on people's understanding of life and how experience is created and where they are on that journey. So again, I'm not disagreeing with anything that you're saying. It's just a different way of looking at it.
Yes. I notice actually we're not disagreeing. It's kind of a different
No.
dimension.
Yeah.
But yeah, pain is always, at least in my experience, pain will always have something to tell me. And it can be me trying to tell myself that I need something like attention. It can also be me trying to tell myself that I have a strategy that's actually quite wise to keep me safe or alive or coping in a good way.
Yeah.
Because I don't have anything else at the time yet that I understand that I can use, for example.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the whole idea, and I agree with you, Jan, the whole idea, again, meeting this kind of experience with curiosity, the openness, as you call, holding space. There's with really self-love, self-compassion. That's an opportunity to learn something new, release any kind of self-destructive behavior, no matter how much it's helping you or appears to be helping you, so that something else can come in. Because pain can be very helpful, and you may not need the pain anymore.
No.
If that makes any sense.
Oh,
And
that,
again, for those of you who are watching, you're more than welcome to share your experiences with that or ask us questions about it.
Please do. Yeah.
Please do. Yes, we learn from you at least as much as you learn from us. Sorry, Bobby, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
I was just going to affirm what it is that you're saying is very much true from my understanding as well, that, pain can be a very good teacher. It's often, particularly when it's unconscious, there's a lesson that we need to learn. And very often, once we've learned that lesson, the pain just takes care of itself, kind of. It's sort of like, okay, my work is done here. I can move on and go someplace else, or having the insight of just realizing that the strategy that you're using to try to get where you think you want to go right now isn't helping you accomplish that goal. It's not a constructive behavior, as you said.
No. And this, holding space to me is what you described, Miriam. It's an opportunity to model self-love and self-compassion for somebody who in a moment isn't able to do it for themselves. And by modeling that, they can settle into it, and then something fresh and new will occur to them at that point. So it can be
Very
that
good
simple.
description.
Yeah.
And for those of you who are watching at any time now or later, notice again that we're bringing up this. We don't always, the majority of us anyway, are not able to be constantly present. And sometimes we need reminding from people outside of us. We have helpers that can come and hold space for us when we are unable to do it for ourselves, and who can remind us that we can do it for ourselves. And then we return to presence and stay there for as long as we can until we perhaps need help from someone else. We have our little angels who come and help us. So just know that, again, if you feel like you're not good enough, or you can't, this doesn't work for me, or something like that, it just means you're human. And also it may mean you need a bit more practice.
Mhm.
We have to start somewhere. We weren't born walking.
Yeah.
So we did learn to walk as time went on, and we fell for a while, and sometimes we still fall. So we don't always have perfect balance no matter what we do. It took us a while to learn to ride a bike or go skiing or ice skating or whatever we learned to do. So just keep that in mind, that there's always a second chance and a third and a fourth. So, and I'm not going to comment about what happens after we die, because I've never been there.
We don't know yet.
Yeah, at least consciously in this life, so I'm not going to say anything about that. But while we're alive, there are always chances. So, and again, if you would like to contact any of us to ask us, how do you do that? I don't know, or I've been trying this for a long time and I haven't gotten it to work. We are more than happy to help you with that. So I see the others nodding, so they agree with me.
Yeah, and
go ahead, Bobby.
Having that little angel in our life who is attuned enough to know kind of what's going on, an ESP, an emotional support person, is a wonderful thing. And we need to recognize that we are so conditioned in our language: fake it till you make it, suck up, power through, no pain, no gain. We've got
Take
all
it
of
like
these,
a man.
yeah. And we've got all of these things that are just, I was working with a lady who has chronic pain in her shoulder. She just holds tension there. And we've been working on that. And we did like the initial session about 2 weeks ago. And we took her pain down to a 0 through that breathing. And we worked on it for quite a while. And I led her through it and did all of that. But she got it down to 0. And then I just suggested to her, set a little timer on your smartphone to interrupt these patterns. Because one of the things that she would do is, she was very ingrained in that, fake it till you make it, power through, suck it up, no pain, no gain, all of that nonsense, if I can use that word. And she started checking in. And she was doing a good job managing it for a couple of days. Then the third day, something went wrong at work. There was a little bit of a fire with one of her kids that had something going on with school, and she was running late, and she just stopped checking in. And she called me up and she goes, my pain's at like an 8. I don't know what I'm doing. I said, when's the last time you checked in? And she goes, oh, like about 8 o'clock this morning. And this was about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And I said, okay, just do it a little bit more often. And that is a pattern interrupt. In neurolinguistic programming, they recognize that we run unconscious patterns all day, every day. And if we can interrupt that pattern, which is what that little angel, our emotional support person, can do for us, and we can also do it for ourselves. Just check in and see, how are you doing? And if you're checking in every hour, and at every hour you're at your wit's end, just assume that's wisdom telling you to knock it down to 40 minutes or 42 minutes or whatever. And if you're checking in every hour and you're doing great, then extend it out to an hour and a half or 2 hours, and just kind of calibrate to your own emotions and to your own day and to your own biorhythms. So you are now more in control of whether or not you're time traveling forward or backwards, or are you in the moment and really embracing the power of now. Huge difference.
Very. Do you want to add anything to that, Jan?
Yeah, I'm just smiling because I had my own little angel walk me home today. And I couldn't believe when I realized the words that had come out of my mouth. I made a decision some time back to wind down my HR business and just slow down, essentially, so that I can do more of what I love to do and be more present more of the time. So I'm on this journey from fast and furious to slow and curious.
Ooh,
I love
like
that.
I was complaining to my mentor earlier today that I'm not slowing down fast enough. And as soon as I had it out of my mouth, we both just started laughing. And I was like, okay, I get it. So yeah, we all get lost in our stories.
Oh, I'm really glad you said that, getting lost in our stories, Jan, because I was going to ask both of you if you wouldn't mind saying something about story. We talk about story, and as far as well-being goes, it's good to identify, it's useful, can be useful to identify our stories. Would you both mind saying something about what you understand story to be, if you wouldn't mind?
Sure. I mean, story is the narrative that we run in our mind, the paradigms that we operate from. We got lots of lovely stories that bring lovely experiences and lovely feelings, and then lots of stories that bring more yucky stuff. For me, and I can only speak for myself, when I'm in a lower state of mind, or my perception is that I'm under stress or under pressure, or something of that nature, or I'm not good enough to do something I've signed up for, there's a repertoire of stories that show up. And they're Jen flavored stories.
I'm sorry, I'm not laughing at you. Malcolm's just come on in the background and he's doing all kinds of I'm thinking to myself, I'm not bringing him on. He's come. He's going to be with us.
He's acting the clown.
He's just being really silly. So I was.
That's so
It's
silly.
actually a really interesting experience of a dual perception, because I'm listening to your words about the story and I have
I'm
this
looking at
person in
it.
the background too. And I'm taking in both of these situations and they don't resonate with
No. Cognitive dissonance.
me. It was so much fun. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. And what
That's
you're saying
okay.
is very valuable. And I know that you understand the situation.
Yeah,
and it wasn't
absolutely. But I just think that, depending on how I'm feeling, certain states of mind, I now notice carry certain narratives or certain stories. If I'm not feeling enough, it's one set of stories that come up. If I'm feeling judgmental, it's another set of stories that come up. But, it's like the colors of the rainbow. Depending on which feeling I have, there's a color of story that comes up. And they're thought loops, like Bobby says. They're the same ones, over and over and over. And you just get bored of them. I think the more present you become to them, you just get sick and tired of listening to them. Once you see them for what they are.
Yeah.
But until then, they look real and true and compelling.
That is very well said, actually. It's we actually believe that other people are causing our pain and discomfort or
Yeah,
problems. I mean, I'm not talking about somebody who actually physically in the world does something, but
yeah,
even then, we can
yeah,
make it into something just by the way we think
yeah,
asshole or whatever it is. And it's like,
yeah,
okay, I need to look at myself.
yeah.
Bobby, do you want to add something to that?
Yeah, I work a lot with stories. Hypnosis is all about creating new, more empowering stories as to why things are going on. And in the work that I do, because I'm blending in the power of presence into that, I have to have conversations with people who I think they feel like I need, and maybe we just all do this. Maybe this isn't unique to that context, that we feel like people need the context of our whole story so they can understand why we are where we are right now. And normally in the first couple of sessions when I'm working with somebody, some version of I've got the story, and my understanding is that's why you're here, to transcend this story, to move beyond it. And often I get a nod. I haven't ever asked a question like you asked earlier, Miriam, but I may start to add that into the mix. I like that a lot. Um, and
Thank you.
I'll say some version of what you're trying to get over is over, but you're keeping it alive by the reinforcement of retelling this story time after time. And sometimes people just get a fresh start, moving to a new city, moving to a new job, getting into a new relationship gives them the ability and perhaps the permission to shed that old story and to turn over a new leaf, and that oftentimes works. But we don't need that external catalyst to do that. If we can recognize, I remember I used to do a lot of public speaking, and I was telling a very emotional story. It was a profoundly joyful story, and tears just started rolling down my cheek. And at first, I was very embarrassed, and that was the first time that had happened. And I was like, oh, this is unprofessional. God, they're gonna be asking each other, how was the speaker? And he goes, well, it was fine until he started bawling in the middle of his presentation. But I just powered through it because thankfully, the point that I was attempting to make, I thought was so profound that I just needed to power through. And that was a blessing in disguise, because the feedback that I got from the people was, man, you being up there and being raw and alive and in the moment with your emotions
Mhm.
was one of the most powerful things I've seen. And I heard that enough that I was kind of like, all right, this, bullshit facade that I've been building for myself isn't nearly as powerful as the real me. And really, from that moment on, in that condition, in that situation, that's given me permission that if tears start to flow, let them, because it's real and it's in the moment and it's happening right now. And there's no reason to push those out of the way. And it's going to hopefully impact people as powerfully as it did that first time. So, yeah, I think the transcending our story, and, there is no moment in the story. Or there is no story in the moment if we are here. And to get more here, all we need to do is just kind of look around and get oriented. What are you seeing? What are you feeling? What are you hearing? What, if anything, are you tasting or smelling? And that's just a wonderful tool to bring you back present again and in the moment. I think most people would find their stories in the long run really aren't serving them in the way that they believe they might once they begin to examine those stories.
Exactly. It's not constructive. It's keeping us. And we telling stories, these sort of continuing these stories, it's almost like re-traumatizing ourselves if there's any sort of trauma connected to
Yeah.
it. We re-traumatize ourselves by keeping that alive. I also use that sort of this situation happened then. That is not this. This is not that. That is over and was over a long time ago, or even a week ago. It's not
Yeah.
now. Now is now, and you're putting that into it, and you're doing it because it's not happening. People will often think, oh, this is just happening to me. No, you're doing it. You're doing it. And when you know that you're doing it, you can actually stop doing it. You may need help to learn how to stop doing it, but you can stop doing it. And when you stop doing it, then there's room for something else.
Yeah.
And then you decide what that something else is, something that gives you something, builds you up, takes you more towards where you want to go, or holds you back, keeps you so-called safe, takes you back to the pain, whatever. So there's a choice in that, and it's a wonderful, empowering choice where we can create something completely different than the kind of stories, narratives that we tell ourselves about why that person did what that person did, or what the situation means for my life, or whatever. It's like, I love asking questions. And one of the questions I love asking is, how do you know? Because unless you've checked with the person and they've been completely honest, you're making it up in your own head, and you might be right. But more often than not, we're just replaying old situations and putting them into situations that seem similar,
Yeah.
are not that. And when we realize that, we can actually stop doing it. And that, again, is like everything else we talk about. It takes practice. For some of us, it happens, boom. But for the majority of us, we have to work at it. And just noticing what those stories are. And they can be really surprising. They can be really surprising, and really realizing that something I've been thinking is a story. Realizing it's a story, and I can let it go. That's real empowerment. And then my life changes.
Mm.
So we have come to the end of the hour, actually. Do you have something quick you would like to let the people watching know, Jan?
I think I said it at the top of the hour. I'm good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Here's your contact information at the bottom of the screen. And of course, you can find Jan in the Presence Posse free group. So you're more than welcome to go in. And you can also watch this replay on replay and ask us questions, and we will follow up.
And about 50 others as well, replays that are.
Yeah, we have a
in
lot
there.
of replays. Bobby, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I'll just, I mentioned earlier my group on Facebook. That is a free group as well. It's called Our Mindful Life. And if you just do a Facebook search, that'll pop right up for you. It's got a picture of a lady on a beach and orange and black background. So you'll know you're at the right place. And in the guides on that, I've got the Spring into Mindfulness program that I recorded last year. And that's where there's a lot of mindfulness techniques, a lot of breathing techniques, a lot of stress reduction techniques, and just lots of tools that you can use to take more control of your life experience and really being much more in control of what you're creating rather than doing it unconsciously out of these oftentimes debilitating thought loops that we have running through our head.
Yes,
time,
absolutely. Thank you.
And
And
how
if
about
you'd
you,
like to
Miriam?
thank you. If you'd like to get in touch with me, this is my contact information and my website. I also have a free group on Facebook called Relation Revolution. You're more than welcome to join me there. And I have I have a freebie, a PDF that you're more than welcome to have if you like. And it is called Less Stress, More Energy, and on the topic of physical health and well-being. There are some tips there for how you can reduce your stress and give yourself more energy. And these are also techniques you can practice and adjust as you see fit. And they're very easy to do and easy to implement in your life. So if you'd like to receive that PDF, let me know and I will send it to you. So at the end of the hour now, thank you all for joining us and watching. And Jan and Bobby, always good to be with you.
And you guys.
So on behalf of the Presence Posse, we thank you all for today's talk. And we will be back next Monday at the same time in the same place with a new topic for you. In the meantime, take care, everyone, and we'll see you in a week's time.